choices to be made.
Welcome. You are about to take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition show. For the next hour, allow her to prepare you in becoming a magnet for a profound love-infused relationship by identifying and focusing on solutions through love. Awaken the light within and let your essence shine. And now, here's Deborah Beauvais on Love by Intuition, all part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
Welcome, everyone. Bonjour, mes amis. And yes, here I am, Deborah Beauvais, founder and owner of the Dream Vision 7 radio network. We're in our 14th year. We're a Boston-based syndicated holistic radio station, internet radio station with all the bells and whistles where you can listen in your car, you can listen in Europe, you can listen with Alexa, wherever you are, or just in your home online. We are proud to be the media partner for the Omega Institute, and this is a live show. And so have a little thingy that clears up. So this is a live show. Bob is in the house, and we want you to call. We have an exceptional guest. You might have heard from him back a few months ago. He was on Bernie's show, Dr. Bernie Siegel, and feel free to do a search on our website, Dream Visions, all one word with an S on the end, the number 7, radio.com, and it'll come up and you can listen to Dr. Steve Bierman. And that's who my guest is. I was just really impressed with his mission and message, and then he sent the book, and I have to say that it changed my life. It really, going through your journey of healing within and coming to a place of full consciousness, there's something that I read that really hit a chord and changed a direction of what I was doing with healing. So I can't say enough about this book, and as he said before we started, it should be a requirement for all the doctors and really nurse practitioners, NPs, and all the clinicians, because it helps the patients, but it also helps them, and it's just a circle of, a continuing circle of healing is what it's all about. So without further ado, my guest is Dr. Steve Bierman. He is an emergency physician for over 20 years or more, board certified. He became renowned for performing painless procedures like simple injections, laceration repairs, and even childbirth. But he studied words and gestures, did far more than prevent pain. They also produce astonishing physical outcomes. Dangerous heart rhythms converted to normal, hemorrhages arrested and constricted, airways dilated. So we are going to talk about the gifts that he is bringing to the health community and to every patient out there. The book is Healing Beyond Pills and Potions, Core Principles for Helpers and Healers. Get the book. I just can't say it enough, and I'm going to say it again later on. This is a live show. Bob is in the house. Feel free to give us a call. The number is 833-220-1200. Again, 833-220-1200. Without further ado, Dr. Steve, come right in. And thank you for coming on the show. It's been an honor to have you.
Oh, thank you, Deborah. I'm thrilled to be here, and as I said, I'm especially excited since you've read the book to talk about whatever interests you in it.
Yes, everything. Okay, so let's start out by, how did you become known for performing painless procedures? Like how did it all start, and how were you received by the other physicians?
So I started by studying both neurolinguistic programming with the marvelous John Grinder, who has remained a friend of mine over these last 30-plus years, and studying Ericksonian hypnosis. with a guy named Steve Gilligan, who's just a marvelous hypnotherapist who trained with Milton Erickson. And inspired by those two gentlemen, I was working in the emergency room something like 12, 13 shifts a month, and I would bring my various learnings into the emergency room to practice and see what practical application they might have to benefit my patients. I don't exactly know how it happened, but somehow word got out. I was doing things that I'm pretty sure had never been done before. I did publish several articles in peer-reviewed journals, but eventually Dateline, if you know that television show, the camera crews came and followed me in the emergency department. And they were able to see the impact of ideas on health and healing right before their eyes. So some of the things you mentioned, I mean, painless injections were common, painless laceration repairs, common, but also some marvelous, previously undiscussed things you can do with ideas when you realize their potency and their power, like relocating dislocated joints without having to pull on them or induce chemical anesthesia, changing dangerous heart rhythms back to normal, dilating birth canals, as you mentioned. So all of those things were recorded on a Dateline episode, and I think that was the beginning of it in terms of beginning to be recognized for the various things I was able to do. Things I would add that all caregivers are able to do. It's very easy to learn what it is I do in practice and to put it into quick application for your patient's benefit.
So back then, how were you received with the other physicians and clinicians? I mean, it wasn't like a shock to their system, especially because you're on the West Coast. However, it wasn't entrenched into the classic conventional medicine.
No, it's not. I worked initially, Deborah, with a group of 6 highly skilled emergency physicians. And while people were, I would say, tolerant and curious, and of course, whenever there was a young child with a chin laceration, the nurses would quickly shuttle him over to my side of the department for care. Even though things were going well, and as I say, there were TV cameras there, and I had a lot of patients expressing their gratitude and joy, I have to say not one of my colleagues ever came up to me and said, "Hey, will you teach me that? Can I learn that? Is that hard to do?" And I think that has nothing to do with their compassion. They were all compassionate people. But it has a lot to do with how standard medical science and education is done, especially in the United States. You know, I'm talking throughout the book about the impact of ideas, the ideas of the caregiver and the ideas of the patient on health and healing. And yet, if you think about it, ideas do not form a part of traditional scientific education. We have cells and molecules and fields and charges, but not ideas. We do give, especially nowadays, more lip service, if you will, to the notion that ideas may play some role by speaking of stress. But we speak of stress in a very, in my experience, in a very nebulous, ill-defined way. And similarly, stress reduction, which I'm an advocate of, but it's, as you know from the book, there are sharper tools that one can use. And beyond speaking just sort of glancingly of stress and stress reduction, we really don't give much quarter to the impact of our patients' ideas on their health or to the impact of our words and gestures on their outcomes.
Yes. So So for the listeners, explain the authority piece. Well, first of all, I should mention that you call it the exquisite art of caregiving. And it's about the person that's in authority. And also, as you mentioned, hand gestures and certain words. Just that alone is, you can actually, the way you were describing it in the book, you can see it. You can feel the difference of what you're teaching and what you're actually doing with the patient versus the norm. Not to say that there aren't other physicians out there that are cognizant of what their words are implying and the power of them, but explain that whole scenario.
Sure. So for me, it began with one of the, I think, really profound curiosities in the healing arts. Namely, I had a herniated disc in my neck, and I, as I think you could well understand, decided not to allow my colleagues to cut my neck open and pull that disc out. So I searched various modalities, tried a few, but I ultimately ended up, believe it or not, in the jungles of Ecuador, had a shamanic healing performed, and quickly recovered from that very painful episode. Around the same time, I was studying with and amazed by Sifu Shirke Lu, who was a Taoist grand master, Kung Fu, Qigong, etc. And I was witnessing his various acts of healing, while at the same time practicing traditional allopathic medicine and doing NLP and hypnosis. And what I noticed was that, not always, of course, in any of those cases, but often in all of them, the intended healing, the communicated healing, would actually occur. Shamanic, Taoist energy healing, and traditional allopathic medicine, and sometimes just simply words well crafted. They all could provoke a healing response. And so the question to me was, is there some common element here? Is there something in this that we're not seeing, but that's common to all of these modalities that's helping people to get well? And what I realized was, if you think about it, in all those cases, there's an authority. There's someone who is the least uncertain. And here, Deborah, I'm not speaking of authority in the sense of like a doctor, I mean a police officer or a boss. I'm thinking of authority like when you have a utterly helpless and dependent child, the authority of that parent. So it's not social authority, it's biological. And what I noticed is that in situations where people are helpless and dependent, situations that are reminiscent of childhood, that the natural thing for an individual to do is to look for the one least uncertain and ascribe, if you will, authority to them, such that their ideas become, say, my ideas. Their reality becomes my reality. And so when I'm speaking of authority, I'm talking about what is essentially hardwired in our central nervous system, a hardwired response to helplessness and dependency that allows us to vest authority in the one least uncertain. And whether that person is a shaman in the jungle, or a doctor in a hospital, or a Taoist energy healer in a private office, provided he's the one least uncertain in the setting of helplessness and dependency, he has or she has tremendous power. And people will often say to me, well, yeah, okay, that sounds, plausible, but you're just talking about how do we know? What proof do we have? And it turns out we have not a mountain of proof. We have a mountain range of proof. For the last 70 years plus, medical science has been conducting randomized controlled clinical trials. And in every trial, if you think about it, there's a white-coated authority who is offering ideas to the helpless and dependent. And the idea is, if you take this drug or submit to this intervention, then you will be cured, fixed, improved, but here are some potential side effects. So they give you the risk and benefit, right? You could have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Your wounds could heal quicker. The infections could go away. You could get better, something like that. And what we see in every one of these trials, and there are literally tens of thousands of these now, is that some 25 to 35% of patients respond to the authority, to the white-coated scientist, let's say, with either placebo, meaning positive effects, or nocebo, meaning negative effects. To what? To simply the suggestion that you could have positive or negative effects. In other words, this primal thing that we're all subject to as human beings when we're helpless and dependent, authority, wields such tremendous power over us, potentially, that their very words can suggest either a positive outcome or a negative outcome. And that, in fact, is what happens day in and day out in traditional and non-traditional healing.
Right. And it's amazing how that stance of being the authority can say a phrase before one goes into surgery and plant the seed of how the outcome is going to be. If every physician did that, imagine how everyone would heal quickly and completely. So, and there's a bit of hypnosis in that too, and I know that from the book you work hard on really educating people that it's not, you're not going to jump like a frog or whatever. Right. But in these days, I think most people, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know what the percentage is, understands what hypnosis is in a positive way, not in a funky show type of thing. And really, in essence, that's what you're doing when you say, when you plant the seed to the person in the way that you do with your hand, your arm and hand in a certain way and the words you choose, you're really planting in their, subconsciousness that they are going to come out of this perfectly fine. They won't be bleeding, less loss of blood and all these things. So touch upon that for a few minutes, and then we'll be going for a break.
Okay. Well, so granted then that we have authority, we being the caregivers, when our patients feel helpless and dependent. The question, as I see it, is not, well, then do we do hypnosis? Hypnosis, as a side note, is not trance. Trance is a response you get from the hypnotic technique, and it's a marvelous one. But hypnosis is really, to keep it simple, it's just ideas evoking responses. And the hypnotic method is a way of teaching, talking and acting that enhances the likelihood the ideas you present will evoke the response you intend. So knowing that, when, for example, I give informed consent before, say, surgery, it's important to be honest, of course. Risks include infection and bleeding, let's say, to keep it simple. But a lot of doctors or other caregivers will say, well, there's a risk that you could bleed and there's a risk that you could have an infection. And if you listen closely to that, that's a curse, because the patient hears that as directed at them. Whereas you're much more honest, and I elaborate the why of why it's more honest in the book. You're much more honest if you say, you can't see this on the radio, so I'll describe what I'm doing. I'm going to take my right hand and point it out and away from the patient and describe what some people have initially. So I'll move my right hand out there, look out there away from the patient and say, now some people can have bleeding from this, and some people may have postoperative infections. And then what I do, I'm abbreviating this, of course, is I swing my other hand toward the patient, and then I very carefully make eye contact when I want to underscore the words I'm about to say. And this is easy to learn. I call it, on the one hand and on the other. On the one hand, some people, I talk about the complications. On the other hand, people perhaps very much like you, Deborah, do very, very well during the surgery. Keep all your own blood and heal really rapidly with delightfully surprising comfort. Now, imagine my amazement when I started doing that, and my surgeon colleagues would come out and say, what did you do? And I'd ask, well, why? Well, because we didn't see a drop of blood, and the patient's awake in recovery, and they're refusing pain medication. They're comfortable. Over the last 30-plus years, I've been doing pre-surgical hypnosis the night before surgery, usually for most people. Spend an hour, hour and a half. And I ask for 3 fundamental outcomes. Keep your own blood, meaning no bleeding. Delightfully surprising comfort, because it is surprising when you wake up and don't hurt. Of course, you have fears that you might. And really rapid wound healing, to the point where you better schedule an appointment 2 days early to have your staples or stitches removed. And I now have scores and scores of patients who have had very complex surgeries, hemicolectomies, bilateral knee replacement, hip replacement, shoulder replacements, all kinds of cardiothoracic surgeries, etc. And as a rule, as a matter of stunning routine, I see bloodless surgeries and painless recoveries and really rapid, uncomplicated wound healing on a regular basis.
That's just amazing. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's rocket science, and yet just the way you explained it, you can see the differences and how powerful it is for the patient. Well, we need to take our break, everyone. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us more with Dr. Steve Bierman and his book, Healing Beyond Pills and Potions. Back in a moment.
Experience a different yet profound healing with Reconnective Healing. Includes yet expands beyond any and all known forms of energy healing. The Reconnective Healing Spectrum is comprised of the full healing and evolutionary continuum of energy, light, and information. It allows for healings that are not just physical, not just mental, not just emotional, yet go beyond that to bring healing that includes the evolution of your very being and essence. Deborah Beauvais, trained and certified by world-renowned Dr. Eric Pearl, offers appointment hours at Seacock Family Chiropractic in Seacock, Massachusetts. For questions or to set up both distance or local sessions, call Deborah at 508-431-1959. Again, 508-431-1959. Or go to lovebyintuition.com. That's lovebyintuition.com.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be loved. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
After narrowly surviving the attack on Sandy Hook Elementary, first grade teacher Caitlin Royd DeBellis was left searching for answers that would never come. Eventually, she chose to focus on questions that could be answered. How do I make sure this tragedy doesn't define us? How do we get our control back? Those two questions led her to found the 501c3 nonprofit organization Classes for Classes. When gifts poured into their classroom, she decided they would help someone else by paying it forward and being kind. This developed into a social network which allows K through 8 classrooms to connect so that every student in the United States can learn these crucial lessons. Classes for Classes' mission is to build students' social emotional intelligence by connecting them to care. All C4C projects are crowdfunded. Any teacher in the U.S. can visit classesforclasses.org. That's classes, the number 4, classes.org. Sign up today.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
Looking for a fun and relaxing getaway? Omega Rest and Rejuvenation Retreats are a great way to unwind and renew your spirit. You can stretch your body, quiet your mind, and do as much or as little as you choose. Join us in May and we'll waive the daily fees. Located in Rhinebeck, in New York's beautiful Hudson Valley, Omega's natural environment and quiet pace allow for extraordinary experiences to unfold. Learn more at eomega.org or call 877-944-2002. That's 877-944-2002.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And welcome back. You're listening to the Love by Intuition show Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can learn more about us on the site as well as checking out all the phenomenal hosts we have. We've got 4 of them right now new, and it's exciting, and they really have their heart set for making a difference in the world and making a difference in your life. So check it out. Again, our phone number, if you'd like to talk with Dr. Steve, is 833-220-1200. Bob is in the house. He'll put you through. And we really welcome callers, especially for someone like Dr. Steve with all his knowledge of, mind, body, spirit is what I call it. So, and get in touch with him by going on his website, healingbeyondpills.com. Just as it sounds, healingbeyondpills.com. This is a powerful book, and I believe every family should have one in their home. So, Dr. Steve, could we talk about, there's so many stories and so many different patients that you've had throughout the book that really hits home. Could you share about Michael's story? Here he had lymphoma. He had been through the chemo. He had been told, I believe, that he was done. And right. Then he came to you.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things perhaps that aren't in the book. So Michael had a horrible leukemia, or rather lymphoma, and it required multiple rounds of chemotherapy, none of which worked originally. Ultimately, medication from Europe was flown in, and he was blasted with that to the point where he became momentarily lymphoma-free and was actually able to have a bone marrow transplant. His brother was a donor. And unfortunately, shortly after the transplant, though initially it looked like it took and did well, he had acute and severe graft versus host disease, the brother's bone marrow essentially attacking his body from the inside now. And in addition, certain latent viruses began to spring up. So he was in a devastatingly bad state of really impending death when I saw him. I think he weighed about 129 pounds, this man who normally would be more like 180-ish when I saw him. He knocked on my door, having gotten my address from a local Del Mar physician, the town where I lived, and said, "Hey, I think you can help me." He had heard a lecture I gave at a local center, which focused on guilt-engendered illnesses. And so there's a hint right there. He comes from that lecture and says, "I think you can help me." And we walked up to the office, and I did an interview. Now, as you know, Deborah, I listen for different things than most physicians do, because I've learned what the common categories of ideas are that tend to engender illness. And so I listen for curses that another authority might have inadvertently laid down. Those are very important to get at and be aware of. Of course, like, you have 2 months to live. I'm going to want to know that so I can find a way to unravel that. I look for dangerous identifications. And to this, I would say we're all identified with someone in our childhood. And normally that's one or both of our parents. And I often point out to people, even if your parents had a perfect life, a perfect relationship, and were perfectly happy, which I think we all recognize as a rare gift that very few receive. But even if they had it perfect, being identified with such a person is no guarantee for happiness for you, because they don't have your fingerprints. We're all different. You have ultimately to find your own path. So I look for dangerous identifications. In Michael's case, at the age of 54, his invalid father died, a tragic death. And Michael did not really grieve for that. He was 13 at the time. Didn't really grieve the way his mother expected, although I have to say it was normal for a 13-year-old. He felt relief. He no longer had a disabled father. He felt free a little bit. And he was also in sudden denial, which when that lifted, he flew into just a torrent of tears 2 weeks later. But he had guilt. And his mother berated him at the time, and we can only imagine, what might have been said. And he was identified with the father. And as you know from reading the book, in addition, he had just had a breakup, and there was something in him that thought maybe through the strings of pity he could draw his girlfriend back. And a couple other, what I call noetic, meaning mental, psychological causes, contributing. My experience is that it's never one thing that causes anyone's illness, never one physical thing, never one psychological thing. It's always multiple factors. And in his case, there was clearly a dangerous identification, a what I call a baleful wish, this wish to get his girlfriend back by retreating into illness. And the guilt wish, which contains within it this desire for punishment. And you can read more on that in the book. That's hard for some people to accept. Not everybody has it. You shouldn't think that's universal, but deep in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it's not uncommon, I would say that. At any rate, there you have a host of noetic causes, psychological causes, that might underlie the fact that no sooner does Michael get over a lymphoma than he gets graft versus host, then he gets an overwhelming viral infection, and on, what I call endless endings. What was really marvelous about his case was, first, he was certainly going to die within days or weeks if something wasn't done. But after our first session, and he was an excellent hypnotic subject, where I began to address those causes I just mentioned, he went home, he slept much better, and he began to gain weight that day. I saw him for, I think, 6 or 8 sessions, each time addressing these various causes in one way or another as an authority and using hypnotic method so that my ideas became his ideas. The idea of cure, the idea of happily ever after, of only healthy solutions and only healthy cells. And as those ideas were inculcated, he got healthier and healthier, better and better, until ultimately he was fine. He was completely cured. In fact, his goal was to find a woman, have a wonderful relationship, and live happily ever after. And that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, it's, just that story, and that's only one of many, is so phenomenal when you think of healthcare today. We have a niece that's no longer, she's transitioned on the other side with leukemia. And she fought, but the doctor said, once the doctor said, you've got a couple of months, that was it. And that is so unfair, I believe, because no one knows. And had she known a doctor like yourself, who knows? Maybe she would be here. Maybe it was her time. I don't know. But I think of Michael's story, how phenomenal that is. And I want to repeat the 3 key pieces for everyone: unconscious guilt, dangerous identification, and an unhealthy wish. Those are things that I own. And the wish was really powerful decades ago, but it's a piece to the healing. And that's why that piece there is so incredible, just for anyone that's going through a healing journey to understand that and how it can be cleared and released and switched, all of that. So when you see because you're in private practice now, and let me ask you, are you inundated with patients now, especially with the pandemic? People are forced to go within and spend time with themselves, and they're confused, and some of these painful things come up. What's happening like that for you right now?
Right. Well, I am inundated, yes, but as you know from reading the final chapters of the book, I'm also very careful to set my own boundaries. And I advise people in the healing professions to make time to goof off and giggle and rest and restore. And I'm very, very mindful of that myself. But I do see exactly the number of patients I want to see every day. And as you can imagine, it's exceedingly rewarding, especially as I see more and more people who have been unable to find satisfaction in the traditional allopathic groove and know in some deep sense that they're curable, but they don't know how to get at it.
Right.
And if I can make one comment on your underscoring the piece about wishing, that I think is really important for your listeners, for all of us, actually. It's this. I don't believe, and I hinted at this in the beginning, I don't believe that stress in and of itself generally is what causes disease. If you look outside your window, there's the world of nature out there. And almost every animal out there is under the constant stress of being their predator's lunch. And yet they're not springing up with cancer and autoimmune diseases and so forth. What happens, though, and what I've realized, is that when stress crystallizes through the volitional system into the form of a wish, and especially if it's a wish, a no matter what wish, I wish I could get out of this job, relationship, situation, no matter what. Beware that wish, folks. I mean, that is something you should never let fly. But when it does, that's when I find that disease comes forth as an answer. There are some simple things that people can do to guard against this. And the first is, if you make your internalized operating principle, your most sacred, solemn, and fundamental operating principle within your, say, unconscious, only healthy solutions. I wish I could get out of this in some healthy way. Only healthy solutions. Then you're well on the way to staving off these baleful wishes. That's really important, right? You gotta, everyone knows the old adage, be careful what you wish. It's even more, it's be careful how you wish. Wish for a healthful solution. And then that should come.
Right. If everyone remembered just that phrase, it would immensely change the way we live, just that phrase. And that's sometimes hard to do. You might do it for a week, and then before you know it, you're back into the hubbub of life, and you forget about it. But that is really, I'm going to say the word again, powerful. It's powerful. So we need to take our next break, Steve. So everyone, stay with us. 833-220-1200. There's still time to give a quick call. We'll be back in a moment.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be love. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
Are you searching for a way to help create global change? Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's vision is to have an eclectic group of radio hosts dedicated to educating, enlightening, and helping humankind with positive messages and tools that enhance lives using different modalities and programs. If you would like to join our team and help illuminate the universe, call Deborah at 508-226-1723 or Deborah at dreamvision7radio.com.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
Why are we here? How can we be happy? Questions asked from millennials to boomers. Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy answers them using true stories of grit, grace, and love. James Redfield, author of The Celestine Prophecy, wrote in the foreword, "This book is a seminar about emerging truths and offers grounded solutions through the art of the comeback." Dr. Bernie Siegel, a contributing author, wrote, "Bodies die, but spirits and consciousness survive and recycle." So, grab some tissues, open your book, and prepare to cry and laugh till it heals. Crappy to Happy by Reverend Ariel Patricia and Kathleen O'Keefe Cannabis. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and booksellers worldwide.
It's a child's job to play, to learn, and to have fun. It's an adult's job to keep them safe. Did you know that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18? Every day, families enter the Children's Advocacy Center because a child's courage to tell someone what happened to them. Keeping our children safe starts with a conversation. This is Michelle Aranger, Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center. Learn more on how to keep your child safe. Visit cacofbc.org. This message made possible by the Fall River Rotary Club.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we are back. To get in touch with Dr. Steve Bierman, you can go on his site, healingbeyondpills.com, just as it sounds, healingbeyondpills.com. Was there anything else you wanted to add to what we were speaking of with the unhealthy wish and unconscious guilt? And let me just say, I think every single human holds guilt of some level, whether you're 5 or 95. And it can be something that you've just taken on for no reason, or it can be embedded through how you were brought up, things of that sort. Would you agree with that?
Probably not, and I'll tell you why, and I'll remind you why, Deborah.
Okay.
Most of us living in Judeo-Christian culture do feel that way, and I think inside of this cultural matrix, what you just said is broadly true. But there are other cultures. Taoism, for example, doesn't really necessarily entail the concept of guilt. Of course, there's shame and regret, but I make the distinction between normal sort of human shame and regret at having done something wrong, and from which we can take a lesson and make ourselves better. I make a distinction between that and guilt, which has, in addition to the shame and regret, a second component, which is punishment. And that punishment can come from within or divine retribution or however it's conceived. And as I said, it's very common in our culture. But there are parts of the world where it's really inconceivable. I tell the story of my assistant, Pat, in the book, who grew up in Singapore as a Taoist and married a Southern Baptist and asked me to explain to her what guilt was as she kept hearing about it. And when I told her, she actually fell to the floor laughing after punching me in the arm. And when she was done laughing, I didn't know what to do. I just stood there perplexed. She got up, looked me in the eye, and said, "Now tell me what guilt really is." So I think that's an important thing to realize. We've learned guilt from our culture, from our priests and rabbis, from our friends and family, to a large extent. And the beauty of that is it gives us a lever through which we can get rid of it, or at least satisfy it and address it, meaning the guilt, so that whatever illnesses might be engendered can be cured. And I would just go one step further. It's not uncommon to see guilt-engendered illnesses. The lecture I referred to that actually ended up sending Michael to me was a lecture on 5 cases in a row where there were guilt-engendering events: suicide of a father, the death of 2 alcoholic sons, etc., where within 5 to 6 months after such an event, the patient was then struck with some debilitating illness: lupus, crippling arthritis, cancer, etc. And so that's the dark side of it. The bright side of it is that once that's been identified, then it can be managed, and then it can be, if you will, satisfied and dispensed with, and the person can quickly recoil to health.
And so you've done this so many times, you know what to look for and what to ask to identify exactly what that is. So, and I must say that the book really instructs at the end. There's all kinds of instructions for caregivers, for physicians, NPs, whoever in the clinical arena, that you can incorporate that into your practice. So that's why I insist that everyone should get this book, Healing Beyond Pills and Potions. towards the end of the book, or at the very end of the book, you talk about 3 points for the patients. One is consciously identifying and I'm going to miss that word. Extirpate harmful ideas within you. And then second and third, can you, we've gone around this, but can you just tie this up with these pointers, Dr. Steve?
Well, sure. I'm going to sort of jump back behind that for one sec and suggest that we talked about the authority that we, when we're helpless independent, vest in our caregivers. And so the first thing we can do is understand that while that happens reflexively, that's not absolutely necessary. In other words, you want to get well, and you want to go to someone who's an expert in whatever it is you're dealing with. But remember, that expert is no expert in you. They have no information about you, your past or present or your future. And so what you want to do as a patient is you want to steel yourself against the inadvertent curse that they may mistakenly offer. And because most caregivers are not trained, as I've been trained, to understand the power of their words and the potential physical and psychological impact of it, you don't want to vest them with authority. I suggest you look at your caregivers as useful consultants in the health care that you will manage that has to do with you. Retain your sovereignty. Retain agency over your health and healing. And if your consultant caregiver is aligned with you, then continue with them. But I think you should have a ready willingness to, if things don't align, leave that caregiver and find someone with whom you can have a true affinity and communion, because through that you'll get your health restored. So that's number one. Number two, we talked about you have to guard against baleful, unhelpful wishes. But in order to do that, you have to introspect. And there's a couple ways to do this. One is what most healthy people do. You just spend what Bertrand Russell called 1,000 days of brutal honesty, going deeper and deeper inside yourself and rooting out these dangerous ideas that you may have. And as I say, the ideas become much more powerful and effective as they crystallize into intentions or wishes. And so you can root them out that way. Not everyone can do that, and that's why it's important to have someone help. That can be a friend, a therapist, a healer from any school. And here I teach healers that if you really want to get very quickly at the cause of something, there's one question, just one question you need to ask, but you have to know how to ask it. A patient comes in and they say, oh, I have X and it's been bothering me for 20 years. And you have to ask a series of questions you've been trained to ask depending on what school you're in. Questions about energy and blocks, questions about physiology and anatomy, whatever is appropriate to your training. But once you've made the diagnosis, the most important question you can ever ask a patient is this: why today? Why now? Right. So I ask that question this way, Deborah. I'll turn to them after the diagnosis is secure and say, sounds very casual to say this, you could have had this, I imagine, 3 days, 3 weeks ago, or perhaps even 3 months from now, or 3 years, or never. I know you're not going to consciously know the answer to this, and neither am I. But if you had to guess, why today? Why now? And then it's very important for the clinician to be quiet, even if it's a minute or two. Why today? Why now? Just guess. Because a guess is a whisper from the unconscious. And it will tell you what the contributory causes are. I give many illustrations of that, as you know, in the book. But those causes tend to sort out, as we've said, as either they're conditioning events, something that's just a stimulus response, training, or they're baleful wishes or dangerous identifications, or retreat into illnesses is very common, where people learned in their childhood that they can get out of something they don't want to do if they get sick.
Right.
And there it's important for all of us to understand childhood is a time of limited choice. And that choice to get a sore throat or tummy ache, that might have been the only thing we had to avoid some horrible, humiliating something on the outside. But as adults, it's no longer a time of limited choice. The choices are vast, innumerable. And so it should be only healthy solutions from now on for all of us. And
with that said, if I may interject, we've come to the end of the show, Dr. Steve, and
sure.
Just powerful information, and I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been an honor, and everyone listening, listen again and share it. So, Steve, thank you for all your tireless work and saving the human race and helping people thrive. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very grateful to you. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. So for everyone out there, get the book, Healing Beyond Pills and Potions. Go on Dr. Steve's site, healingbeyondpills.com. Share the show, share the book, how to get it, all of that, because this is important, can change your life for the healthiest way you can, better than you could ever imagine. Put it that way. Until we meet again, au revoir.
Are you seeking a clearer path to love? Then tune in to the Love by Intuition show next week. All designed to your highest good. To contact Deborah Beauvais, owner of Empowered Connections, call her at 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or link on to lovebyintuition.com. Remember, we are all one, and we are all part of the miracle of love.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.